Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining what is our fourth Power Hour. And looking at the list, we do have some repeat attendees, and that makes me so happy. So it means that you're enjoying these weekly conversations with many of our St. John's faculty, friends, and colleagues of mine. Last week, we had a conversation with my physical therapist, Carolyn Knopf, and she got rave reviews. But I don't know if you heard me earlier as I was speaking to April Merenda. I was really excited for this one. If you notice, and maybe I'm a little sensitive to it right now because of this talk, I've been noticing so much in the news about travel. And there was an article in Forbes, New York Times. In fact, this morning I was telling April, and unfortunately I was a little busy today, so I couldn't get to watch it. But today's show, I think, had something about flying, and they've had a couple of, the news programs have been covering it. So I guess with the rollout coming soon, we hope, everyone's thinking about travel. And I know some of you have trips probably already scheduled for the fall. So we're going to have a great conversation with Professor April Merenda today about the travel industry. April is an alumna of St. John's. She's a colleague and also a friend of mine. And when I approached her, she was so great in taking time out today to be with us to talk about what is going on with travel and what can we expect during this pandemic. I don't think I introduced myself, for many of you may know me. I was looking at the attendee list, but there are some names, maybe you don't know who I am. My name is Susan Damiani. I am the Director of Gift Planning at St. John's University, and I'm also the Director of the McAllen Society, which is our legacy society. So thank you again for joining us. April, I don't know if you unmuted yourself yet.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you're there. Okay. Hi. So how are things going? How are you coping? Are you teaching a class?
I'm teaching currently.
Okay. How's that going?
Being in the travel industry for so many decades, it's been interesting, to say the least, to be following. This is my first pandemic.
I know, like all of us.
Through many stages in the industry where you either had the grounding of the DC-10s to the volcanic ash, obviously 9/11, but this has been something different that has affected everyone. And I think the goal of today is really just to put it out there. I don't think we're going to have any solutions as of yet, but I think everybody will be walking away a little bit more comfortable in the situation with travel. And I appreciate your invitation, and I thank you for it.
No, thank you. If you notice, I know Lisa had said I'm wearing these wings, and I got it at the TWA Hotel in JFK about a year ago. But I feel almost like we're going back in time because it just seems like travel almost has to reinvent itself all over again. So it will be interesting to hear in a couple of minutes of all this information that you're going to share with us on how travel is going to survive during the pandemic. But let me just share with everyone a little bit of your background and why I asked you to talk about this topic. April Merenda is, as I mentioned, an alumna. She graduated in 1975, and she also has a master's that she received in 2013. She is a very experienced professional, just demonstrated successful work history within the hospitality industry, skilled in business planning, tourism management, sales and marketing, food and beverage, and culinary arts. High energy, no doubt, and hands-on professional. Students absolutely love her. She's a fantastic teacher. St. John's is really fortunate to have her on our team and part of our family. And I now turn the computer screen over to Professor Merenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to pretty much walk you through the current state of the travel industry post-pandemic. And I say post because for many states, they are opening up right now. And for those of you who are joining us, you may have a trip that is planned, or you're thinking of planning a trip. In fact, it would be interesting in the question period, if you could plug in there if anyone has a trip that they're planning. And I'd also like to know if there's anybody other than Pat Wilson, who I do know is in Florida, if there's any out of state individuals joining us today, so I can try and address your particular questions for your state. But basically, I wanted to share with you that the hospitality industry is probably one of the most embracing employers next to our own federal government that we have here in the States. In fact, tourism is the first, second, and third largest employer in over 32 states in the United States. A new job is created every 2.5 seconds. And I believe I read today that one out of every 10 jobs in the United States is in the travel industry. So to get the travel coming back will help the economy as well. So I think it's a win-win with this conversation, not only on travel, but getting the economy back. By the way, we're going to share this PowerPoint with you so that you can have it and share it with your colleagues. So we talk about the billions of sales that are generated in the industry. In fact, this particular year in 2020, it was estimated that it would grow at least in the area of event planning up to by 44%. And that was due to not only weddings and conventions, but a lot of different events taking place around the world. Obviously the Olympics, which is now canceled, but the point of the industry right by the pandemic was it was going to be a banner year, and not only in the United States, but throughout the world. The four largest markets for the travel industry are: number one is California, obviously due to the California coast, the wineries, you have the Disney products there, the beautiful Highway 1. It has Northern California, Southern California. It is the top destination and bringing travelers there with cruises as well in the United States. Second, obviously, Florida, again, due to the Disney, the theme parks down there. A lot of cruises embark out of Florida. You have that great Miami coastal area with the beaches and the proximity now to Cuba and to other areas down in Florida. New York, obviously, in the top three. We've got the Broadway shows. We have the largest arena, Madison Square Garden, the big tourist attractions of the Empire State Building, the shopping, the different areas of music in the Village, the financial district. It is quite a big tourist attraction, even for New Yorkers. And then fourth comes in with Nevada, with the casinos and the tourism going over to the Grand Canyon. So these four particular states in general, if they're not opened up with the shutdown and being able to move and travel freely, obviously our economy is going to be affected with these four states, so keep a watch on them. Again, hotels, very, very important in the scheme of the travel industry. They support 1 out of 25 jobs. I know we have some colleagues on the call today from various hotels. So we appreciate what you've done for us in tourism and for our economy. You bring in over 660 billion annually in sales. Again, the travel industry sales from 210 to now for hotel sales increased 43%, and the employment as well that they have done has had great increases. Now, when we talk about the travel industry, it's a wide range of areas. You've got the hotels, you've got major resorts, conventions, your B&Bs. I think we have Professor Morris on our call today who actually teaches our bed and breakfast class. All-inclusive vacations, which could even include your timeshares. Obviously, many spas, the cruise lines. Cruises have brought in 25 million travelers a year, of which Carnival represents 50% of those cruise travelers. The casinos, a growing travel destination, and of course, a growing profit margin for various hotels. You've got your theme parks, such as the Disney brands, and even Airbnb, which was a very big entity up until till now. So these are all the different factors that are being closed down and affected with the pandemic. Also notably is the food and beverage industry, and we'll get into that a little bit more in depth. But you have the growth now of the celebrity chefs. Even those fast food outlets are becoming a phenomenon, not only here but in throughout the world. And of course, the brands of coffee from McDonald's to Starbucks, getting into the food industry as well, and combining that industry with Uber and the ability to have food on the go through the car services. Another big portion of travel is through your travel agencies, whether it's the actual agency, such as an Automobile Club of America, Liberty Travel, American Express, but you have your online agencies, Expedia, Travelocity, you have the booking.coms of the world. All of these have been basically been part of our industry, and because of no fault of their own, included with the tour operators, were told after billions of dollars of generation of business that they had to be shut down. And of course, with that went the millions of employees that they employed. So you see here that there's been a very big growth in hospitality over the past 20 years. And in fact, it wasn't until 1999 that St. John's University took on the hospitality management as a degree. Now, of course, I'm a double alum. I will not tell you when I graduated, but it was far earlier than when St. John's started going into the industry. By the time they started that degree, I had already been president of a major company and was part of the first rollout of the first online booking engine. The company that I was with, lowestfare.com, was then purchased by the people who now are Priceline. So I was right at the forefront of the industry, and I, like many alumni from St. John's, were the pioneers of this industry. And that's why I feel comfortable being able to speak about it, because I was involved in my decades of experience within the industry. I have been within the hotels, the casinos, working for the airlines, working for tour operators, and of course, owning my own travel company, which was started right after 9/11. So I feel very confident to speak freely about how businesses can move forward and how people themselves can move forward in travel after such a pandemic or worldwide tragedy, if you will, embraces and touches all of us. So the first thing I want to get into is the airlines. Okay. In my view, your trip in most part doesn't begin with the ticket, because you need to go from point A to B. The airlines and how they handle the pandemic or are able to survive the pandemic is probably the billion-dollar question out there. in the United States, most of our airlines are privately owned, and that's a good thing. I mean, even the government, even our president now said he'll help them, but nobody wants, the government to be in the travel industry. You see in Europe, where you had airlines such as Lufthansa, Alitalia, British Airways, Air France, all being government owned, they've had losses and failures over the years, and they are looking at the model of the United States and saying, you know what, we think the United States has the right way to go. As we're speaking now, one of the most wealthiest individuals in Germany just invested $1 billion to increase his stakes in Lufthansa. So I know many of you are thinking, oh, well, the government's going to come in and bail out the airlines. I think it's going to be more like a loan or helping them get through it, because the government is cognizant that you cannot have a travel industry with tours or travel or business travel without the airlines functioning. Right now, the airlines are functioning less than 90%. They are saying that they probably won't have the cash flow to exist much after what they were given with this recent stimulus. And they are really hoping that the red light is given to open up travel. Now, what will happen with them is that capacity will be significantly less. They're going to be, many of them right now as we speak, Delta has already taken out seats in their business class. And when one airline in the United States does something, they all do it. So you've got Delta, American, United, Frontier, JetBlue. Those are your big carriers. And you'll have significantly less seats available because of less seats available on the plane, taking the middle seats out for social distancing. But you're also going to have less seats available because there's going to be less flights. And on this PowerPoint, I have for you some of the research I did for you. And there's a great article that I listed here about Delta recently cutting its different airports. They now have 10 less airports, basically affecting us here in New York and of course in California. But you're going to see a lot more airlines cutting their routes and trying to get profitable at a point that then they can grow and bring it back. They're also furloughing a lot of employees. Many of their employees luckily took advantage of the PPP that the government did, or they had to take a 20% pay cut. Some of them are being furloughed. Some of them may not come back. So I tell this to our students who are in hospitality, that a lot of people will be leaving the industry, ready to have retired, and that maybe this is the impetus for them to take that retirement, and that there will be opportunities for our students who want to enter the hospitality industry by the time they graduate or get their degrees. Now, there are several countries that are restricting travel until 2021. Vietnam, Cambodia, and Spain are one of the few that I found, but there's going to be a lot more, and a lot will be over the visa situation, the international visa situation. Until that is cleared out, it's going to be a restraint on travel. Just today, Great Britain announced that if you're going to Great Britain and you want to visit Britain, you have a mandatory 14-day quarantine. So who's going to go on vacation, a 2-week vacation, and then have to extend it really to be a month in order to freely travel? Basically, what the UK is saying is, no foreign travelers right now. They're just going to have people within their area of the UK be able to travel within the UK. I think you're going to see a lot of that. So I think that will be through the remainder of this year. So for those of you who may have plans to travel this year, I have to say that it's going to be a wait and see situation. And mainly because of all these things that I'm educating you on with the visas, with the quarantines, and the globalism situation is that countries want to protect themselves and not have to go through this all over again, and that's a smart thing. Now, with the information I have here for you for the airlines, all of you remember after 9/11 having to go to the airport and you would get in that booth and you raise your hands and the screen would check you to see if you had any metal or whatnot. They just installed it in Hong Kong, and I understand that as we speak, we are going to be getting it here in the JFK airports within the next month. And it is a machine that you go in and within seconds, it disinfects your body. And this seems like it's going to be the new norm when we go to the airport or any type of travel situation with the sanitizing and disinfecting for the viruses. So when you have chance, when you have time to look through the PowerPoint, look at some of the information I've given you in these links because they're really, really very helpful for you. Okay, now the hotel and Airbnb industry, as I pointed out at the beginning of our presentation, was booming, okay? They were just racking in profits like you couldn't believe. Right now, in the area of Marriott, which is probably one of the largest chains in the world, it's the merger with Starwoods made Marriott brand the largest hotel entity, and it's an American-owned company. They have shut down more than 85% of their hotels. And again, they were lucky to be able to have the protection with the PPP, but that's going to be ending soon. So they're slowly trying to open up, but they've admitted not all of the hotels in the rollout will be able to open up. And in fact, they were building some new properties even in China. And right now, China travel will not be on the radar for a couple of years. Many hotels, especially individually owned hotels, small boutique hotels, unfortunately, as we speak, will be filing for Chapter 11. And I think the larger brands will work with them. I believe on the call today, we have the opportunity to have a colleague, nice chain that St. John's and I have been working with, and we're going to open it up to him. And I believe one of our students who works for leading hotels of the world may have an opportunity to share what they're seeing in the hotel industry. But right now, I know she's taking advantage of the PPP and hoping that it's not hoping, she will indefinitely get her job back. And in fact, many of the jobs of the 30 million, think of this, of the 30 million unemployment, 20 million is in this industry I've just described for you. So really, it's within everyone's interest to get everybody back traveling and markets opening up. I put a great article in here from the CEO of Marriott, the Marriott family, on how they've invested during this downtime and this new disinfectant for the rooms. They have new guidelines now for the hotels. You will not have maid service while you're in the room. You're going to be pre-checked in prior to coming, so it's just a matter of going right to your room when you pick up your information at a kiosk. A lot will be automated, if you will. They are going to try and stagger the room so that, you know, the room in between you is not booked. So they're really going to try and still do the social distancing. There'll be no more magazines, newspapers, anything that people can touch in a hotel. Your amenity won't be the chocolate on the pillow. It's going to be a complimentary pair of gloves, mask, and some sanitizer. But again, this will be the new normal for us. And these articles that I picked out for you, I think will be interest for you when you have time after our webinar. A great article here is on Airbnb. Here, Airbnb became the biggest threat to the hotel industry, yet it took this pandemic to bring the Airbnb down. They now have let go of over 25% of their staff. And the main issue is, will people be safe going into someone's home versus going into a Marriott where they are going to be doing these great virus controls with sanitation and have social distancing situations in place. So right now, Airbnb, which was going to be look like almost the future for the industry, is now going to have to reinvent itself. However, if you want to look at this travel talk today from a generational point of view, the verdict is that the millennials, who right now the millennials were like, they didn't care about the coronavirus to begin with. They were the ones breaking all the rules, wanting to be on the beaches, and oh, it's not going to affect me. And they will be the ones that continue with the Airbnb support, but it'll be more like the baby boomers and family travelers that will probably go the route of safety with the hotels. But there's some good articles there for you. Now, tour operators, obviously a subject close to my heart, being in the industry myself. But you're already seeing some companies declaring Chapter 11. The first that declared Chapter 11, and it's so criminal because it's right here in our backyard of Queens, and that was Pacific Delight, a 50-year-old family company, the largest producer of trips to China, closed its doors on February 10th. And you're going to see a lot more smaller companies not able to make it. But you will see companies like American Express, AAA, companies within the United States Tour Operators Association that has that $5 million mandatory bond that they put up. And with the support of ASTA, the American Society for Travel Agents, supporting them, I think you're going to see a containment of bankruptcies there. And they've all pulled back. They've pulled back their staffing. But in time, they will be able to reinvent themselves. Now, a big help for the tour operators is going to be their tourist boards. And you see already that the Italian Tourist Board has now said that once they're able to begin accepting travel, that the Italian government in the area of Sicily, this is just for Sicily right now, I'm sure other regions will step forward. They're saying that they're going to pay half of your flight and a third of your hotel package cost, and this will be through various tour operators. I'm sure Perillo will be one of them. So keep a lookout for what the tourist boards are going to be doing with their money to reinvest and get people back. This happened after 9/11 as well. You remember the big campaign, I Love New York, Canada, throughout Europe, everybody to get people traveling after 9/11 with those tourist board campaigns, some of the best ever. I Love New York campaign was one of the best ever created. And I'm sure with the opening up of Broadway and to bring people back to New York, I'm sure that Governor Cuomo and the New York Tourism Board will be doing something to get New York going. You see now there's some countries that didn't get that affected. Greece, maybe because it's a warmer weather climate area, they're beginning to open up as of July. Whereas the opposite with Spain, who was hurt really bad, they are not looking at tourism until 2021. And from our perspective, we were told that we can't even do tours to Australia and New Zealand because there's going to be no group airspace to get people there. So that's going to be affecting the travel business as well. But I do believe that if you go with a company that is reputable, you won't have to worry about going forward. Now, talk about during the pandemic, many people lost their money. People were booked to go away, but they couldn't travel because of, the airlines were grounded. We were told that we couldn't travel, but a lot of the countries didn't reimburse that money. So it's very important to get travel insurance. And one of the things that the government's doing now is making it mandatory that it covers COVID in your insurance policy. Right now, it wasn't covered. And we were lucky that if the tour operator canceled the trip because of COVID, then the insurance companies did give you your money back. So that's a big thing. And if you're taking notes, you want to make certain when you travel that you have repatriation insurance. It's not that costly. You could buy it as a bridge to your umbrella policy or through your travel agency when you're traveling, through your credit card company. It's maybe $50, $60. What does that insurance do? God forbid you do decide to go away, and you know what? Round 2 of COVID comes back. With this repatriation insurance, it enables you to use that ticket to come back. All right, you need that. And in fact, with my travel connections, you won't be able to travel without having that insurance. So remember to have yourself insured and to go with a company that's reputable, backed by the United States Tour Operators Association, been in business for a long time, and has the financial solvency to get through this particular pandemic, because you know it is going to be financially devastating on some of these smaller tour operators. Now, as far as the cruise lines, I have to say that the cruises are really, really going to be affected big time for post-pandemic. I mentioned 25 million a year travel on the cruises. 50% of that is with Carnival. Now, how you handled this pandemic is how you're going to be remembered. And we all remember that Carnival cruise line in Japan that was pretty much docked there for weeks, and 11 people died on that ship. And they had over, they said about 3,000 people on that ship, and over almost 1,000 people tested positive for COVID. So going forward, people who are going to be booking a 3,000-4,000 passenger cruise line are going to be very wary on how they relate to a cruise again. And not only that Diamond Princess situation, but you had the Grand Princess in California, where you had 4 people who died on the ship there. And then, of course, the Holland America ship in Florida that was sailing around for weeks, not being able to even find a dock. It was finally able to go through the Panama Canal and return back to Florida. So the cruise lines have to really reinvent themselves. They will probably need to wait for the vaccine, because it will be very hard for them on these 4,000 passenger ships to guarantee people's safety if the virus continues, and to social distance. I mean, buffets will be out. There will be a whole new way of food and beverage on the ships. And of course, a lot of the ships right now have severely cut their staff, and there's going to be a very big fear factor going forward. And I think that we'll have to look at what's going to happen with the cruise lines. Now, you do have river cruises, and river cruises, which are maybe 50 cabins, are seeing that a lot of people who were usually cruisers, who didn't want to unpack every day and just stay put and see the world from their cabin, river cruises are going to be a natural alternative to those big cruise lines until we can come up with something, a solution. But I put a great article here on Norwegian Cruise Lines is really thinking that they might have to declare bankruptcy. And even Disney was reporting losses as well. So we're going to have to take a look at what happens there and how they do the social distancing and come up with some entrepreneurship ways to move forward. Clearly, out of everyone that I'm going to talk about today, whether it be the hotels, the airlines, the cruise lines, food and beverage got slammed the most. 20% of all restaurants now have returned their keys to their landlord. They've gone out of business. They're not coming back. And by June, if this doesn't lift, you're going to see a significant number of more restaurants closing because they just don't have that financial backing, especially those mom and pops privately owned restaurants, to hang in there. Danny Meyer was just on TV yesterday. It was a great talk that he had, and he was so sad, saying that it's really a shame of is happening in the food and beverage industry, and it's really going to see a lot of them not come back. You have a lot of the staff on unemployment. The only silver lining out of all is this is that Uber Eats or companies that were able to reinvent themselves and do takeout, they were able to maintain their source of revenue. But I left you some great articles here that I want you to read. And the one on Starbucks is great. The CEO was able to go back to the landlords where they have all their Starbucks. He just reopened 85% of his around the world. And what he did is they renegotiated the leases with the landlords, because it's either the landlord is going to have to take the keys back, as these restaurants are doing, or work with the company and say, look, we could try and work with you. I think you're going to see a lot of that working together, yin and yang, between restaurants and their landlords. Finally, on the ride shares and the car rentals, you see here another silver lining. Uber and Lyft saw an increase, maybe because of the Uber Eats, but because people are definitely afraid of subways and mass transit. And clearly in New York, they found it was the metals in the subway that was the biggest transport of the virus. And even in the cruise lines, they found the metal railings, the metal in the cruise lines, the metal in the planes was what was the issue. And of course, with this new sanitizing system that everybody's going to be coming up with, you'll have an opportunity to see some solutions there. You'll also see a lot more local trips. So, for example, in New York, once it is able to open up, you'll see areas like Mohonk, upstate, or the Hamptons, the Jersey Shore for people wanting to drive to Jersey. You'll see far more local trips, and for that, you'll need car rentals or use of Ubers. So while business travel may decline, that car rental companies should be able to make up their losses with that local travel. And of course, Hertz was one of the first now to go back to their investors and say, look, we need some forgiveness here. We're not going to make our earnings. We're not going to have the cash flow that we projected. So it's going to be a lot of negotiations there as well. So I know that we didn't present with you a very pretty picture, but you're going to see the entrepreneur spirit in the United States and throughout the world coming into play, because travel is a universal want and desire. And you're going to see new investments with sanitation mechanisms, people coming up with ideas. It's going to happen. Just as it happened after 9/11, people will come through with some ideas. And since this is a global pandemic, you're going to see a lot of countries within globalism trying to work together, sharing ideas on, what works in your country, creating vaccines and whatnot. And I think we left you with a nice video here that I think you'll all enjoy, that pretty much shows the want of one of the national teams boards. And again, this is what I see is going to be happening to get the spirit and the overcoming of the fear that one may have. And I don't know if we had anybody respond, but is there anyone thinking of traveling this year? If you could just put it in your, all right, so now we got a great question on weddings. Susan and I were talking, the biggest entities that were affected with the pandemic were wakes, weddings,
Right.
and nursing homes.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to come up with solutions for those. The big challenge, obviously, with weddings is the social distancing, and it didn't help when J-Lo and A-Rod just canceled their wedding in July.
It's July in Italy.
And
So Italy's getting hurt again. That's a lot of money, right?
my nephew's getting married Labor Day weekend, and I feel so bad for his future wife, because she's like, look, I want people to dance. I don't want
Mm.
walking around. But we met with the business owner, and they seem to think that they can do it. For the person who answered the question, go back to the venue where you're having the wedding. Hopefully they have a larger place that they could swap out, larger room for you that they could swap out. And
That's
the
a good
big thing
idea.
is they're not going to be able to do buffet. It's going to be service. And I thought, wow, that's I was surprised with that. But actually it's easier and more sanitizing for them to prepare the meals and have the men with gloves serving the meals versus people gathering around food, touching food areas. And that is going to be an issue on finding a solution for the weddings. But look, when there's a will, there's a way. So they are trying to deal with the weddings as well.
April, thanks so much. That was a really great talk. I think you covered every area and gave us a lot of information to think about, and also the articles to reference later. I know the video, the visual didn't come out, but when we forward you the recording, you can take a look at the video at that time. Before we start the Q&A, I actually have a special guest that I would like to bring on. He's a former St. John's classmate of mine. His name is George Kurth, and George is the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Fitzpatrick Hotels North America. You might be familiar with the hotels. They're in Midtown Manhattan. It's privately owned. I don't know, George, I saw your box before on the screen. Is George with us?
I am here.
Oh, great. George, can you do your video so we
My
can
dog's
see?
over here.
Oh, okay, great. George, when April was talking about the hotels, I know we had a discussion yesterday that was really, really interesting. And when April was talking about reinventing, I know George and I were talking about, even with any industry now within the pandemic, we have to be creative. And George, if you could just share, I thought it was really interesting. In fact, I think your hotel was noted in an article or was on the news about what you're doing to just safeguard your guests when everyone's ready to come back to New York and to travel again.
Yeah, I mean, we're putting a lot of thought into what the guest journey is going to look like from when they arrive at our front door to when they leave, and trying to cover as many of the details of protecting their health safety, as well as that of the team members that work in our hotels as we can. And it's just something that over the last couple of months keeps getting built upon and built upon and built upon. And, we're going to continue to look for more ways to do that. It's one thing to open up the city and other cities and say that people can travel now. And then it's another to when they actually feel comfortable enough to do so.
Right.
There's a lot of forces at play. There's the health concerns themselves. There are financial concerns. Individuals that might have been out of work for the last couple of months and don't have the travel budgets that they thought they did. A big part of travel in New York is corporate travel, and big companies have been suffering. Just like the small ones too, and they might tighten up on corporate travel. So anything that we can do to help all of those factors, looking for ways to listen to our customers as to what is important to them, and then translating it into ideas to help us get them there. We're actually going to be filming a video on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week that traces the journey of the guest as they arrive at the door until when they actually get to the room. And some of the steps that we're adding are ones that I think anyone could imagine, that we're going to be propping doors open or automatically opening doors, that our bellman doormen are going to be wearing protective gear, masks and gloves. And When they handle a bag, they're going to change those gloves after every individual guest's bags that they handle. We're going to desanitize the bellman's cart as the bags come in the door and on up to the room. The front desk process is going to be as seamless as it could possibly be. We're not going to handle credit cards anymore. Keys are going to be handed to guests in sanitized individual packets. They're going to be giving a personal safety welcome kit. And April had mentioned this before, that Marriott and a lot of other hotels are doing it. We've been doing it for a while as well. The kit contains a mask, gloves, personal hand sanitizer, and a sanitized wipe. And they'll have that for the stay. There are sanitizer stations set throughout all the public spaces. We're sanitizing everything in the public spaces every half hour. So we've added staff, and
Wow.
that's a pretty big expense. Over the
I would
course of
say,
the year
yeah.
for 2 hotels, it's going to be about $250,000
Wow.
until January, really, just to have the staff on hand to do the extra steps in the public spaces. But it's worth it, and it's necessary. When they get upstairs to their rooms, yeah, there's going to be things that have been in the rooms traditionally that won't be. Magazines, placards, menus, anything that you could transfer surface to surface issues on. As they walk in the door, waiting to greet them is going to be a
I like this idea.
so that they could take their shoes off and not worry about
Go.
putting things in from the outside into the room that they're going to sleep in. So we're really trying to consider out of the box options, and the key point is listening, and we're trying to do a lot of that. We've probably spoken to 150 different corporate contacts over the last couple of weeks to get their input on what's important for when they do come back online. So that's the game right now, and
Right.
we've got some rough sledding ahead of us. But another great point that April made for your students in particular is that with great change often comes great opportunity. I like to think back to the Great Depression. John David Rockefeller essentially built Rockefeller Center in the middle of the Great Depression. It created opportunity, it created the ability to purchase very expensive land for much less, and look what we wound up with. It's a landmark, and there will be opportunities in this. There will be opportunities in careers. You're going to see transition now, and that can be painful, but it could also be really good, and create new opportunities. So we have to
I
keep
think
our
so
chin up
too.
and
Yeah.
keep our head down and just keep plowing. We'll get through it.
Exactly. And I think I had asked you this with New York. Have you heard, in terms of the arts and culture, when that would be opening up? I think Cuomo had said that's probably going to be the last in the last stages.
Yeah, it's definitely set for the last phase, and they really haven't put a date to that yet. And then they can't. They have to play that close to the vest. The worst thing you could do is raise
Right.
expectations and then dash them. It is a critically important part to what we offer, particularly on the leisure side. People come to New York to go to the theater. They come to eat in our great
Exactly.
restaurants. They come to shop in our iconic stores. They come to go to Rockefeller Center. Right now you can come and go to Central Park. We need a few more things. We need a little help in terms of bringing the attractions back, but they have to be wise in doing that.
All the hotels get together in New York now because of that, because I was reading one article and the person said, I'm not afraid to travel. It's just, why should I come to New York now? If Broadway is shut down and the museums are shut down, why reserve a hotel and come to New York? So is there a hotels association within New York that are banding together to help each other with some type of campaign to bring people to New York for other reasons than arts and culture?
Yeah,
Mhm.
as much as it could be a very competitive industry, there are also aspects of it that are very cooperative. Shane Cookman, who's the area director of operations for My Hotels in New York, is actually the vice chairman of the Hotel Association of New York. So we're very active with that organization, and Shane is working on some really good things to try to get a coalition going to drive campaigns to bring people back to New York. So yeah,
That's
absolutely,
great, 'cause-
there'll be a lot of support.
Yeah. Well, you definitely help other businesses that are outside the travel industry. So thanks so much, George, for taking time and sharing this with us. We appreciate it. And please stay with us, because we're going to answer now everybody's questions, and I'm sure they might be some questions about hotels, and you could probably step in along with April. April, I don't know if you've seen.
April did a great job. April covered a lot of great stuff there.
She did. She did. I am seeing very quickly here, someone's planning a trip to California in September to visit their daughter, but they're worried about fewer restaurants and no theme parks, sort of what we were just talking about, George. April, do you want to answer that question?
Where is she traveling from?
It's Consuela.
Oh.
It's April's friend.
Well, I'll call her.
Do you see an increase in the popularity of nature, rural, hiking-based travel with the disadvantages of city-based travel post-COVID? I would think so, right?
Just from what I can see for 2020 agendas, spiritual, somebody has their mic on. Spiritual, soft adventure types of trips, family trips where rather than being with a group, you're going to be with your own small group that you feel comfortable with. So you'll see a lot more independent group travel and smaller types of offerings from tour operators. But yes, travel that is more aesthetic and meaningful, and a lot of people will still have their bucket list and want to go to the trips that they had wanted to go. And I think they're going to realize now that don't put off those trips, because as you can see, you know, our time is limited, and to try and do it when you can.
Okay, there's a question here, or actually a statement about the insurance. It says this person is from IMG Global Site. They're applicable U.S. or foreign government authority, any person who purchases coverage on March 27th, 2020 or after, or has not entered their destination country by March 27th will not be eligible for benefits directly or indirectly related to COVID.
All right, well, depending on your right now, somebody has to turn their mic off.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
The government, this is the big issue, and that's why Trump and his team are working with those insurance companies. They have to have some type of coverage. Now, what happened this year, and I can tell you, we had the student group going to Italy. The day we were supposed to leave, February 28th, they shut down Italy. Brillo Tours covered everything that we paid and gave us a credit, and we as the university refunded all the students. I had extended a scholarship for the students with their airfare on British Airways. British Airways would not extend one penny. So will we ever book British Airways again? No. And this goes back to how I said how people handle things. Now, many companies, my company, AAA, they gave full refund. Some companies did not. So as far as the insurance went, if the clients weren't covered, the tour operator worked with the clients. And going forward, the government is trying to get that COVID protection in there. But in the case of what happened now, if the trip was canceled because of the virus, the clients were able to get their money back.
Someone just mentioned that their Viking trip got canceled for August, and Viking gave them a gift certificate, a trip value, plus 25% bonus.
Yes, this is the big thing now, even with Marriott. You're going to see this now. Marriott, the cruise lines, they're all going to be giving you plus 20, plus 25%. If you own a timeshare, your maintenance will go down 20%, maybe 25%, depending on where you are. This is to get cash flow, number one. Marriott's doing a gift card, for example. And, for future travel, if you buy $1,000 worth of a gift card, you get 1,200. So you're getting an extra 20%. So Viking, Uniworld did the same thing. They offered, actually Uniworld did something great during the pandemic. If you wanted to, you got the credit, but if you didn't want the credit, and especially for the senior citizens where you don't know where this is going to go with you, if you have some type of condition, they gave a full refund. Again, I see business with Uniworld because of how they handled it being far better, but they're also doing amenities. All the river crews are going to benefit because they're going to get a lot of what the cruises would have gotten, the big cruise lines.
What about traveling to Israel, countries in the Middle East?
Well, right now, everything's pretty much shut down, and I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis for them. If they go the route of what the UK did, and my fear is a lot of these countries are going to do that. They're going to want you to quarantine before you come there. Well, you're not, the average trip to Israel is a week or two. So nobody's going to do a month's vacation in Israel. It's not going to happen.
Right. Getting back to what we were talking about, travel insurance, I think the person that asked it just clarified. She said they were lucky because it was before the change, but I'm referring to repatriation coverage, or if you get sick abroad, travel and medical will not cover it.
Right, but the government's right now, the Trump team, that's a big thing. And that's what the Trump team's trying to, even for businesses, they're trying to get that insurance covered. So I think that's one of the things we've got to keep our eye on.
Yeah, because that's going to give people a little more trust in wanting to travel, feeling better, right? If they have.
Right, but some companies have what you call they're self-insured. Some of the big travel companies like AAA, Grand Circle, they're self-insured. You could cancel for any reason, and you'll get you won't get your money back, but you will get a trip voucher for a future trip. That's better than nothing.
Because I was reading something where they said that they might include the COVID, although I find that hard to believe. And they were also talking about maybe even having different passports, changing the passports now. I read somewhere about that.
Yeah, I think right now where I want everybody is to be comfortable that just as we were after 9/11, just as, look at the seamless thing that happened with the volcanic ash. I think it was Iceland or one country, and then the insurance companies wouldn't cover that,
Right.
And then that actually in years' time, there was ways to get around it. So the thing is, you buy the coverage where you could cancel for any reason, and especially if you could get something for a health disclaimer, that will help.
There's another question here. Are travel and cruise companies reporting interest for 2021 opportunities?
That's a great question. And that's why I think the president and a lot of people on the task force are being optimistic. You cannot, I think because we were shut down so longer than we anticipated, the anticipation, the desire, and I know it's a shame that some of you couldn't see the video, but it's a great video, and it will go to the point of how it's human nature for us to want to have that wanderlust travel spirit and to travel. So yes, the answer is there are an increased demand for 2021. I think a lot of people also are banking on the fact that there'll be at least some type of breakthrough by the end of the year with at least that we're close to a vaccine, or that even if there's no vaccine, that they have a little bit more of a pulse. See, at the beginning of this whole pandemic, we really didn't have all the information. And it's a shame, and it was no fault of our own. It was not forthcoming from countries that had it. And now we're sharing more information. And we know that the big thing about this virus is that it is different from the flu in that it spreads more. And if you have these underlying conditions, it can kill you. Yeah, but the flu can kill you too. And there is a flu vaccine, and we're still having 60, 70,000 people a year dying. I think what Fauci said today was great with the social distancing. And then if we continue that we aren't a touchy-feely society as much as we were, that it may even diminish the amount of flu. And they're saying in countries, in Italy, that everybody is so demonstrative with hugging and kissing, that was a big part of how it spread type of thing. It's very
No, that's true. That's true. I know it. I can even respond. I was reading something, I guess it was in the New York Times, and they said they had seen a spike in searches for 2021 spring break travel, more than last year. So, again, you know,
all these students didn't get a chance to go. I feel the worst for the seniors in the nursing homes and for the students who are graduating in 2020 and don't have that experience to have a graduation. I mean, this trip that we were planning for our students to go away to Italy, the Amalfi Coast, during spring break, was canceled. And I feel badly for them. And when then there's a will, there's a way. And there will be spring breaks and there will be trips. And yes, the interest for 2021 is beyond what they had anticipated.
Yeah, and I agree with you because you could see already, I mean, especially New Yorkers, we're very antsy. We like to keep moving. And like you said, it's in our spirit that we love to travel. So I don't think the travel industry, it's going to go through a little rough spot, but it's going to bounce back because people want to travel. So I don't think you're going to prevent that. I think someone else has mentioned that maybe we should look at travel focusing and celebrating American history. And here's an opportunity, wouldn't you say, that you're going to see maybe everyone traveling differently, maybe not going abroad, but maybe traveling out to California, as you mentioned, the national parks. What about RVs? We didn't mention anything about RVs. I read somewhere that there may be a rise with RVs, people going on the road.
RVs and the price of gas is
Right, if it's lower, right.
number one trip for 2021 is the national park.
I believe that. Here's another question. Have you heard anything about Queen Mary 2 cruise ship leaving from New York City in September, going to Canada?
Right now, somebody's mic.
I'm sorry.
Right now, all the cruise lines are behind closed doors, reinventing the wheel, negotiating, trying to do, trips, full foliage trips up to Newfoundland, up to to Canada. They're changing. And what we'll do is, Susan, we should try and maybe in 90 days. There's so much happening, and I can tell you right now, a lot will happen before the election and after the election. And because I think the election has a lot of going on with this too, unfortunately. So let's in the next maybe plan another time that we could get together.
Definitely.
And we'll have the summer to collect more information. And by then we'll know even if the universities are able to go back and if, what it looks like for these countries. But as for that question on the cruises, and I think there was another question.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
About going to California. Again, I think a lot's going to happen within the next couple of months.
There's another question here. Interested to hear about how airlines will not accept credit cards at check-in or check-out.
All right, this turn the mic off.
Okay.
The biggest fear of the virus was the paper money. And that's why paper is going to be, I mean, I feel bad for magazines because everything's going to go digital, even newspapers. It's going to be very few things that you could touch because that will be a transfer of the virus. China burnt all of its currency and reprinted all of its money as a solution on the transfer of the virus. So right now, ATMs, Vimo, PayPal, credit cards are the way to go. And yes, the airlines will not be able to accept cash, and that's going to be an issue. I think a lot of people will try and get these prepaid credit cards where you can have a certain amount of cash on that, or gift cards. That will be acceptable. But they're going to do all in their power to look at where was the source of the virus. And it's not just the metal structure of the airline, the craft itself, that they're going to be sanitizing, but the money, handling of money was the issue as well.
I also read something about, how we say air travel will be the stimulus. So they said there's like a domino effect, that if the airline's affected, then the shops and the restaurants and the terminals. So how do they survive while everything is in the slow period?
Okay. Turn your mic on. That's why I said the trip doesn't begin without the airline. How the airlines get out of this is going to be the indicator of how we as a country, as an industry, and as lovers of travel get out of this. So a lot's riding on them. A lot's riding on them because within the airline, yeah, you have restaurants, you have the coffee shops, you have all the travel paraphernalia. The big thing will be those the Hudson newsstand, which I think has a monopoly in the United States. I don't know. They're going to have to reinvent themselves. And, as you know, in JFK, you were able to go for a spa treatment and manicure and all that. I mean, a lot of that is going to be looked at. So, yeah, that's a good question. Again, that's all going to be how this resolves itself. Let's just all pray that that there's some entrepreneur out there that comes up with something. I mean, that's what I'm rooting for. Or that, we are the race. I forget what the president called it, the race for the vaccine. That look, I was commend him because he said he'd like us to be the ones to get it, but if anyone else gets it first, we'll work with them. But obviously, the vaccine is the utopia in everybody's mind.
Definitely. I think we covered it, but I'll read the question. I have a river cruise in Russia in August and a tour of Egypt in November. Is it going to be a problem? I think you pretty much said it depends on what each country sets up, right?
Right. Well, right now, Russia is at the point that we were 2 months ago. They're not in a good situation. So it's going to take them longer. I think the river cruise company, you wait for the river cruise company to cancel. Don't you cancel. Have them, because once they cancel, then it's their responsibility to give you your money back. And don't pay in full yet. If your river cruise is when was the cruise, in July?
The river cruise was in August.
Okay, then usually it's 90 days prior to departure. Just have your deposit there, and let's see what's going to happen. But don't cancel it. Let them cancel it. Then they have to give you your money back.
Thank you. Well, we're over. I know I'm not surprised because I knew we would have lots of questions. Does anyone have any more questions for April or maybe even George on hotels? Okay, we have one more here. Frontier, JetBlue, and American Airlines is only offering credits for future travel. Who can I contact to get money back?
All right. Susan, I gave you some good advice on this one. Go back to your credit card company. Remember the story I told you about British Airways not reimbursing those tickets that I bought for my students? Well, that was paid directly to British Airways with the check. for my own ticket, I paid for my own ticket with American Express. American Express gave me a full refund. So you need to go back to the credit card company where you bought your ticket and deny the chargers, saying that the flight was canceled, it did not operate, we weren't allowed to travel, and the credit card companies are supporting the individuals.
Good advice. So thank you for all that reference material. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely have April back. We want to hear more because it's evolving, right, April? It's just going to keep changing, especially the status of other countries, you know, could be opening up. And it's also exciting. I mean, maybe sometimes we're always locked in with certain countries, I mean. So maybe now we might say, gee, you know, maybe I need to look at another country, and it could be exciting, and we might have this great trip that we plan for ourselves, and it's better than what we had already planned. Who knows? We have to look optimistically, as you said. And good entrepreneurs, right? A lot of businesses could come out of this. Definitely for our young people graduating from the hospitality industry. What are you telling them now as they enter into this whole new world?
I have the biggest interest in the masters because they're figuring, you know, the job market's not that great, and that's a good decision. So a lot of them are going on. We now have a hospitality masters, and I told anybody that it has a sales entrepreneurial background to look up Abbott. Abbott is hiring. They're the ones that are making the testing. They're hiring throughout the United States. These companies that are opening up for the drive-ins for testing, or even for hotels that they're doing certain services now. They're going to be looking for people who are into customer service and service. So I think the hospitality industry is going to be fine.
Oh, that's good to hear. And also, anybody on the call who's a Lachlan or a McAllen Society member, we have our Globetrotter program that we started 2 years ago. We've already been to Rome, we've been to Portugal, and unfortunately, we had a trip planned this coming October to Paris, because the university is celebrating the 150th anniversary. So we didn't cancel the trip, we postponed it. So if you didn't have time to sign up, now you can sign up for our October trip 2021. But this October, we're going to pass just because in light of everything. But thank you, everyone, for joining our Power Hour. Next week, we have Professor Christopher Bazinet, and he's going to be talking about immunology. And I think we'll learn more about COVID. But once again, thanks, April, and we will definitely have you back. Everybody, stay healthy, be well, and thank you so much. Stay connected to St. John's. We love you. Take care. Bye-bye.